SMMA owners dreams of hitting $10,000 per month, right? And I had that dream as well. The only problem is it took me 4 years to get there. That's how long it took me to scale the first agency to $10,000 per month. That's 48 months, 208 weeks, and lost count on how many late night existential crises. Now, because the truth be said, I actually wasn't one of the smartest or the bravest SMMA owners in the room when I first started. You see, I thought getting exceptional client results was the key. And I was wrong because, hey, we live, we learn, and eventually we scale. And 4 years later, I figured out how to actually sell without panicking every time someone said, let me think about it. As it turns out, you don't need to overcomplicate sales. It's actually pretty easy. In fact, if someone is making it seem complicated, it's because they're trying to sell you a $997 course, ironically probably called How to Sell Anything to Anyone, right? And so without further ado, here's the lessons that allowed me to scale not one, not two, but 3 marketing agencies right now to 10K, 20K, and 25K respectively. And the first lesson is that a good offer sells itself, which is why it's called irresistible. What I mean by that is that at the end of the day, no matter what you're selling, the skill set that is the sales, your ability to sell, has a point of diminishing returns. You can only improve your ability to convert so much, right? The industry standards is anywhere between 20, 30%. And if you're getting 40%, you're crushing, right? Now, when it comes to an offer, the offer really makes everything seem simple. It simplifies everything. And what I mean by offer, I don't just mean what you're selling and the price point at which you're selling it, but more importantly, the market in which you're selling it, which is why Alex Hormozi says the most important thing to a successful business is a starving crowd. That's what he means by that. In a starving crowd, in a starving market, you're going to basically have a ball selling whatever the hell you're selling to them. Focus on not turning a no into a yes, because that's not going to happen. You can only convert maybes and make sure you don't mess up the yeses. That's really what sales is about. It's not the boiler room kind of aggressive tactics, hoping and wanting to close everyone and their mom on every single deal. It doesn't work like that. That's wishful thinking. The way you have to show up is ready to meet people where they're at. If they're ready to buy, if they're interested in remotely, you're going to basically deal with their objections and then you're going to close them. Now let's get to some brass tacks. There's 8 reasons why someone doesn't buy. And that's something I learned from Cole Gordon. This is pretty amazing. Looking at every single call, you should be always able to understand why that call did not convert. And those reasons are pain or the lack thereof, meaning they don't have a pain. They don't have a problem to be solved. That doesn't really happen if you're running ads, for example, because for someone to opt into an ad and to show up to a sales call means they have a pain that you have to resolve, that you can resolve for them. A more interesting one is doubt. Basically, the thought that they can probably do it by themselves. So there's a sweet pocket where the lead, the prospect, thinks that they cannot do it by themselves, and then beyond that point, they think that they can. You have to get them to that sweet spot where they think it's hard enough that they cannot do it by themselves, that they will not do it by themselves. And that's when they will enroll, recruit your services. The third one is cost, the cost to them, the pain, which means that they're not present to the cost, to what it's costing them, the cost of inaction, the cost of not having whatever you're selling them. The fourth one is desire. They're not clear about the desire. Obviously, yes, they know what they want, but they need to be present to that in the context of your conversation with them. You need to basically go through these questions and ask them questions, even if you already know the answer. Because a lot of salespeople, a lot of salesmen, they start to think and assume they already know the answers to these questions, especially after you've done it hundreds of times, right? And so that doesn't matter, because you're not asking it for you to hear it necessarily. You're asking it for them to hear it, for them to say it to themselves. And that is the whole point of gap creation. We'll get to that in a second. But fundamentally, what we're talking about here is, on one hand, you want to get them present to the pain, to the cost of that pain, to how that's impacting them, the lack of, let's say, that your marketing services, how is that impacting them? And then the desire, which is the revenue goal that they want to hit, the number of clients, the number of services that they want to commission each month, and then more so the impact on other dimensions of their life, which is getting a bit more complex. We don't need to go there. We're going to try and keep it here pretty top level, basically just giving you the 80%, the 20% that's going to take you 80% of the way there. The next one, number 5, I believe, is money, which means they cannot afford it or they won't afford it. They won't afford your services because they don't perceive it valuable enough. That is something that you can sort out with tie downs, basically making sure that there is no other reason why they wouldn't go forward with you, any of the other reasons that I mentioned. And if money is really the only consideration, then there could be financing, there could be installments in place. There's all kinds of mechanisms there. I'll get to that in a second or in another more technical video. But for the time being, let's just move on to the next one, which is support. This is a huge one. The support basically means they don't have support from their partners, from their spouse, from their business partner, whoever that may be. This typically shows up, it rears its nasty head in the form of, let me think about it, I'll get back to you, let me talk to my partner, let me talk to whoever. That is really, really bad and really annoying and frustrating because it can be very, very easily avoided by preempting it. Preempt it. Find out at the beginning of the call. Temp check. Not temp check, just find out the logistics. Are you the sole decision maker here? You can finesse it. You can do it pretty elegantly in a way where you can ask how many employees they have, what headcount they have, and then slowly and subtly transition into a question around leadership. What is the leadership structure in your company like? And then they'll say, we're a small company, we're a big company, I run it with my wife, whatever. Find it out and then find out if it's worth having them on the call with you. Because the last thing you want is to pitch for an hour for them to then tell you that the spouse is not there or any other excuse like that. And then finally, trust and uncertainty. This is a huge one again, meaning they don't have trust in you to be the person who can deliver the process. They don't have trust in the process itself. They don't think that this is the right thing for them. And basically they're uncertain. A confused mind doesn't buy. And so you have to do your absolute best to do a thorough discovery to understand exactly what it is that they've tried in the past. That means overviewing their previous attempts to resolve the problem that they have, and then position your service as the thing that addresses every single one of those pain points in a way that's clear. The way to ensure that is to basically have strategic gaps and breaks in your pitch in order to make sure that they're all there with you along the entire way. And so that's, again, a separate piece for another time for a technical, very technical video. But for the time being, just remember that there are 8 reasons why a call will not close, will not convert. And you have to always be able to identify which one that is by listening back to your calls, by figuring out what didn't quite hit, where the penny didn't drop, so that you can fix it, so you don't have to deal with it over and over again. Cool. Closer framework. Closer framework is good enough to get you 80% of the way there. If you've not heard of closer framework, essentially is clarify the problem, label it, observe and overview their past concerns, sell the end destination, explain away their concerns, and then reassure them. This is explained by Hormozy at length. This is a very simple framework, and if you do, I would say even half of this, you're going to close at least 10%, if not 15%, and that's going to get you started selling. So do not overthink it. Don't think you need spin selling, gap selling, whatever other straight line persuasion. Closer framework is enough, and it's a mnemonic that's very easy to remember. And it tells you that you should start discovery, clarify and label that discovery, and then super important, overview their past efforts. If you don't overview past efforts, then you're not going to be able to position yourself as superior to that. And I know that this may sound a bit technical and it may confuse you, but if you really want to start somewhere, just start with the closer framework. You can start with that today, and you can basically throw out the window the excuse that you are not prepared, that you do not know sales, that you don't have frameworks, all of that stuff. Cool. And so without moving forward, do not obsess over sales before you have everything else dialed as well. Because most businesses do not have a sales problem. They have an operation problem. What I mean by that is that if your client delivery looks like a group project in high school, then don't blame your sales team for it. Meaning you can basically sell out of your eyeballs. You can sell left, right, center, and you can get with a ton of clients. You're going to have to fulfill for those clients. And if you have an operations issue, if you have a fulfillment issue, if you don't have the right team in place, or if you yourself don't know how to fulfill on that promise, you're going to end up with a bunch of complaints, a bunch of refunds. And so sales is really just a small subset of problems that people seem to obsess over before they have an actual business. Now, that being said, take that with a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, if you don't have sales, if you don't have clients, you don't have a business. So don't put your cart before the horses. Don't try to solve every single business fulfillment problem before you have clients. But also, don't give sales, don't assign it too much importance. Don't ascribe it all of your attention, because it's just not worth it. It's one of the 4 or 5 key core components of a successful business. Your marketing is one, your fulfillment, client success, retention. They are just as important. So treat them all with the respect and attention and respect that they deserve, because that way you're no longer going to make this sales thing into a big mountain that cannot be climbed. And you're going to start realizing that the quicker you tackle it, the quicker you can start focusing on these other things that matter just as much. Cool. Now, the next point is gap creation will do most of the work for you. Meaning, in the gap creation, essentially, you are creating a divide between the pain the prospect finds themselves in when they start with you, the sales call that is, and the desire, the outcome that they want to get to, and the reason why they cannot do it. You widen that gap, you find out exactly what it is that they want to achieve, why they haven't got it yet, why is it a problem now, why do they want to deal with that right now, how have they tried to solve it in the past, what worked, what hasn't, why it hasn't worked, and what it is that they want to achieve. Ultimately, that creates a polarity. The difference between that and that itself creates a force that pulls them into wanting to basically resolve that. It's something that needs to be resolved, and that is the space, the fundamental space without which you just simply won't sell, or not as effectively at least. And so, to that point, emotional selling sells. Meaning, if you're gonna be able to go into the sub dimensions of each of those 2 components, the problem and the desire, meaning not just what's your revenue now or where do you want it to be, because no one cares, there's no emotion involved in that. Rather, you want to go to the extent where you understand how that affects other areas of their life. How does that affect their relationships? How does that affect their self-worth, their image, their identity, their ego, their family life, all of those things. And also how would the dream outcome impact all of those dimensions of their life. That's when people get emotions involved. And that's what I mean by it. I don't mean getting people to cry on the phone. Now, bear in mind, when I started doing that, I basically started closing and contracting $18,000 in contracted value closed in about 4 or 5 days. So that's just how powerful emotional selling is. Emotional selling is like magic, meaning people love to hear this will change your life more than they love to hear this will improve your ROI. Go figure. Okay. At the end of the day, just bear this in mind. Remember that if you tap into people's feelings, they'll be like, take my money, basically. And don't overdo it. Don't try to pull on their heartstrings, because that's just becoming manipulative. Either you or them will start crying before the end of the call. Cool. The next one, overview past pains. What I mean by overview past pains is this is such a simple concept because it kills so many birds with one stone. It means it creates emotion, it creates gap, it deals with doubt, and it deals with the trust objections. When you overview what they've tried in the past, you get them present to how painful and annoying and frustrating that's been. You also start creating the gap between where they clearly want to be and all these trials and tribulations that have already gone through. You also deal with their doubt, meaning they start realizing that if they couldn't figure it out this whole time by themselves, then they're not going to be able to do it by themselves moving forward either. And that is one of the first 8 objections that I mentioned at the beginning, beliefs rather, if you remember. And also with trust, because if you have all this ammo, all this stuff that hasn't worked in the past, and Alex Hormozi explains it really simply, it's like explaining to someone who's dieted and exercised, etc., that the reason why they didn't lose weight is because dieting is insufficient by itself. It means when life gets in the way, you're basically gonna get that weight back. Exercising is not good enough by itself, because if you're trying to build muscle, you can't just be running on a treadmill. And so this is the way you position your thing as different, your solution as different from all the things that they've tried, and it's crucial. It's crucial to be able to do that. And the only way to do it is to overview. And the only way to overview is to discover and to create gap. So you see how all these things kind of feed into one another. Cool. Awesome. That being said, do not coach in a sales call. No matter how good it feels and no matter how good you are, you know your stuff. That's why you're on a call with these guys. Do not coach them. The moment you coach them is the moment you lose your leverage. The more you give them, the more you give the house away, the less leverage you have when it comes to closing. So hold fire. I know it's going to feel very tense and very tough to keep drilling them with questions, and you have to do it in a fine, elegant way, and make sure that they don't realize that fundamentally the agenda, the reason you guys are on that call is very different. They want to get in and out with as much information as possible. You're there to sell to them, and this is a divergence. This is a misalignment. It's fundamental to sales. Because of that, you need to frame your calls. You need to tell people that this is going to take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long it's going to take, and justify how you're going to conduct that call. You're going to ask all of your questions at the beginning. I like to ask my questions at the beginning because I want to understand the specifics of your business, understand exactly what we're dealing with, and then I'm going to give you the chance to ask me questions. Sounds good? Good. Once you have their consent, once you framed the call, you're basically going to be able to do just that, to ask them stuff as opposed to feeling the need to coach them, which again loses your leverage. Cool. Very important point, tag on point to that is learn to shut up. Learn to shut up at key moments. So there's two reasons why you want to use silences. One is because you want to make sure that with every question that you ask them, you've given the prospect enough time to answer and to think about whatever else they're going to say. So make sure that they really finish what they had to say before you jump in, especially when you're asking them emotionally loaded questions. And then the second point, the most crucial point to shut up, is when you drop the price. The moment you drop the price, nothing else comes after that. Yes, our price to work with us today is 6K. You drop it. Crickets. That's it. After you drop the price, you should be so silent for as long as it's required, till the point where it almost feels uncomfortable. My partner and I have had silences so long, you could literally hear a cricket order Uber Eats. Super, super loaded, emotionally loaded silences. So you just keep quiet and look at the camera, and they look back at you. And sometimes they're going to be very tense, very uncomfortable. You don't say anything until they say something. Just like that. And oftentimes that's when they close, or when an objection basically crops up. Cool. The silence isn't awkward. Think of it as strategic, because in that moment, they're not processing the cost. That's when they're starting to imagine themselves driving the Tesla they want to buy next year. Don't interrupt their vision. Let them rationalize it, deal with that themselves. Make it a them problem. Cool. All right. This is a policy that we're pretty much swearing by right now, which is aim for a one close call where possible. You'll get a feel for when that's not the case, but generally speaking, don't do any of that outdated stuff. Don't send any contracts, don't send any proposals, don't send any website information, whatever they say they want to kind of peruse and go through. You don't do any of that. It's outdated, it's pointless, and it's a false objection. It's basically them trying to brush you off politely. If they ask for contracts, if that's for proposals, just deal with it as the objection that it is. Basically try and find out exactly what it is that they want to see. You can basically take the more high ground and say things like, sure, there's a very vast contract. Our website's pretty chunky. I don't want you to be wasting time going through things. Let's help you make a decision right now, what it is exactly that you would need from me to move forward, and try and deal with that on a call right there. If you have to, if they say nothing and you have to, you can always call out as well. You can call them out as well. Can I be honest with you? Most people who say that, they're not ready, rather, to make a decision. We reward decision makers, quick decision makers, and you can also incentivize it with an offer, like an OTO, one-time offer, that you can only give them there and then on the call if they close with you. I cannot stress how many calls we lost at the beginning because we didn't do one call closes, and so that is instrumental. Okay, cool. Right, the next one. Do not wish that there are no objections. Expect them and address them. So what I mean by that is a lot of people go into sales thinking that they're just going to pitch, they're going to have the delivery of their lifetime, the client is going to close, shut up and take my money. Not the case. That's not how it happens. If anything, you want objections and you want to expect them, because if you don't expect them, and what I mean by objections is every reason the client might throw at you for which they will not close straight away. If they say, how does it work? If they say, what is the timeline, etc., these are logistical questions. Those are not objections. But if they say things like, I need to think about it, I need to talk to my partner, it's too expensive, I'm not ready yet, I'm not sure this is the right thing for me, etc., those are objections. And you want to expect them, because if you don't expect them, you're basically going to be all nice and happy and excited. You'll pitch, you'll get the objection, and then you'll crash, and you're not going to be able to claw your way back from there. Instead, if you expect for there to be objections, trust yourself to close them, and then basically to resolve them and then close. That's going to dictate the tone of that interaction. It's going to be completely different. So do not wish for no objections. That's like, wishing for, it's wishful thinking. Expect objections, address them, and move on. Cool. A very important point that I want to drive to, which is abundance, is fundamentally the name of this game. Be okay with something like 20% close rate when you're starting, meaning 2 out of 10 clients is where you close. And if you get to 30 or 40%, be ecstatic, be stoked. Give me a shout, because I'm hiring. We're hiring closers, and I'm interested, because that means that you will sit on a lot of calls that don't go anywhere, that may feel frustrating. So I know that this sounds like, 20%, it's a good number, but when you're there 10 hours in 2 days, or 5 hours, and you only close 2, do not think that the first 5 or 6 or 7, 8 calls in which you didn't close were a failure. Do not let that get to you. Keep your numbers close to you, and remember that you're just putting the reps in when you have a dry spell, when you don't close for 2 weeks straight. I literally had weeks when I didn't close anything, and then I had days where I closed 5, 6 deals in 1 week. You cannot let those oscillations, those dry spells get to you, because that will affect your close rate, and that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, cool. So conclusion, be okay with 10%. If you're closing at 100%, you're not a salesperson, you're a hypnotist. It's not happening. Sales scores are like dating apps. You swipe a lot, most don't work out, but every now and then you basically pull it off. It's no different. And so let's move on to the next point, which is always have leads coming in. Always. Do not interrupt your lead flow. Whatever way you generate that, whether it's email outreach, whether it's DM outreach in channels in social media with appointment setters or otherwise, whether it's referrals, if you have a robust referral network. Our favorite has been and always will be ads when you want to get momentum and traction quickly. Ads, content for inbound, by all means. You need to get leads in abundantly, because the close rate can only go so high. 40% if you're good, 50% if you're phenomenal, world-class leading, but the lead flow is infinite. Theoretically, there's no limit to how many leads you can get in, which is why the likes of Hormozy is saying the biggest lever that you can pull that's making everything else irrelevant is having a good brand. That's how he says it. Ads can dwindle, brands less likely, right? They endure. I think that as long as you have good ads in place and you have the ability to run good offers, you're not going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to leads, when it comes to sales calls. And so do not dwell on this, because if you're looking at a calendar jam-packed with appointments, you're going to be selling completely different than if you're wondering where your next sales call is coming from, right? Okay, so basically, for that to happen, as soon as you run ads, we're going to speak about the ads example, do not wait for the leads to book themselves in. You book them, and you start selling straight away if you can. Get them on a call. Money loves speed. Follow the speed of money. If you're getting leads inbound, there's no reason why you shouldn't call them within seconds. Forget the 5 minutes. We'll call them within seconds of them opting in. They'll commend you for it. Business owners will recognize that. Professional. Very professional and very unique. Not that many people can boast a speed to lead of 5 seconds. To give you an idea, speed to lead means how quickly it takes you to get to a lead that just got into your system, into your CRM. If you do it within 5 minutes, you're pretty much industry standard. If you do it within 5 seconds, now you're talking. And so waiting for leads to book is like waiting for the gym to call you and ask you if you're coming in today. It's not happening. You do it proactively. And it also helps you with friction distribution, meaning The moment you call a lead, you're basically not asking them to go in the calendar to find a time that works for them. Every little hesitation, every little friction is basically dropping your conversion ratios. And so you'll never have a near 100% self-booked ratio, but with a robust system of appointment setting in place, you are quite able to book 90%. We used to book at the highest 95% of our leads in. And it goes without saying, some of that is going to be you doing follow-ups as well. Cool? Perfect. Now, when it comes to show up, do not expect a 100% show up rate. 50 to 70% is enough. It's not ideal, but it gets the job done. However, you can increase it with follow-up. You can increase it with confirmation calls, with texts, with looms that you can send to the clients before they show up, with basically little baits, little trailers, little sneak peeks, if you will, to get them, excited and ready to show up. And that is another reason why you want to basically set your own appointments, because when you set an appointment, you can do a bit of discovery. You can try and find out exactly what it is that that client is trying to achieve. And then you can do a bit of a value bomb. You can allude to some similar client in some similar market that you're already working with, who you're already pretty much achieving the same spectacular results that that client wants. And that is something that usually lights a fire and gets them keen and excited. It's that little piece of rapport building. That's what gets them to actually show up, so that you don't stay there ghosted, fiddling the thumbs. Okay, cool. Know your metrics. Fundamentally goes without saying. Know your metrics. Know your cost per booked appointments. Know your cost per show up. Know your cost per qualified show up. Not everyone's going to be qualified, whether it's a misalignment in service, whether it's a misalignment in affordability, their revenue, or their willingness to actually go with your service. It could be a misfit, right? As long as you are closing on a 3-to-1 ratio, and what I mean by that is your CAC, your cost of acquisition of a new client, to the lifetime value of that customer has to be 3-to-1. So if you're closing at $500 per new client, and don't be daunted by that number, if that client stays with you for well, I was going to say 3 months, but it doesn't matter how long they stay for. What matters is the lifetime value of that client. If it's 1,500, that is a number that can scale. It's a number that gives you breathing room, assuming that your margins are good enough to hold that, right? Let's not go into that kind of detail right now, but just expect to break some eggs to make an omelet. It's a fundamental business concept, and it's just shocking to me working with so many business owners and so many agency owners that people are not willing to invest and understand they need to put some dollars in order to make some dollars out. And so you can be more aggressive than that. Yes, you can basically close at a 4-to-1, 5-to-1. The better that ratio, the more power to you. But at the beginning, do not be picky. Close everyone that you can, because you need cash. Your business needs cash. You need reps. So I guess mistake that we did for a while was to look at appointments and to think that they're not qualified, and maybe not try our hardest to close. I then realized that if I was going to get good at closing, if I'm going to get the reps in, then I might as well use every single opportunity to try my skill set, to try my rebuttals, my objection handling abilities, my syntax, my structure, the structure of the call. And so, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to close a client and then you're going to have to refund them. That's fine. It's better than not closing them in the first place, right? And it's also going to help you with your identity. Your identity as a closer, as someone who can handle sales calls. So don't be afraid of success. Just close anyone, close everything. And run ads because you need volume. You'll never get good or even decent enough with one call every 2 weeks. If you're afraid of sales, just run the ads and book the calls, because it's impossible to get scared when you're drowning in appointments. You're going to go from what if I fail to what if I need a second coffee just to stay awake and go and plow through all of these appointments. Running one call every 2 weeks is like, I don't know, playing basketball and shooting a hoop every 20 minutes. You'll get nervous, you'll get out of practice, you're not getting the reps in. It's like a new structure, a new framework that your brain needs to acclimatize itself to. And so the answer to that is an abundance of leads, an abundance of appointments. Cool. Another hack, an important hack on how to get good at selling quickly, is to set all of your appointments, like I already said. And also, if you're doing any local lead generation service, booked appointments for your clients, whether it's B2B, whether it's B2C, whatever it may be, set all of your clients' appointments to. And more importantly, treat them like sales. Don't treat them like appointment setting. Treat them like appointment selling. What I mean by that is, for example, we do this in our med spa space. We collect deposits. We collect deposits for the treatments that we book for because that maximizes show-up rates. Now, it's not the fact that people pay the deposit necessarily, the $25, $29, $30, $50 deposit that makes them show up. That's not necessarily the reason. The reason that they show up is that for them to be willing to give out money, a deposit, that means that their mind has already been made that they want this service. They have been sold to. And so I treated all of our appointments, all of our B2C client appointments, our fulfillment, as sales calls. Hundreds of appointments for our clients, hundreds of appointments for ourselves. I treated them all like sales. And in fact, the frameworks that we developed for our appointment setting team, for our call center team, are rooted in selling frameworks. And so by the time you are going into your sales calls, you'll have all of that setting experience as well. And I cannot stress how important and useful it is for you to be able to close your eyes and just visualize these things, man. You've done it so many times that you visualize your scripts, you visualize your rebuttals, you visualize your syntax, the order in which a call should be conducted. At any point, you know where you are. You're at the gap creation, you're at the discovery part, you're at the pitch part, you're at the temperature check bit, the transition, all of those things. Once you have the map, the blueprint in your brain, you're playing with this thing. You're playing it in your natural element. And so the next point that I want to bring to you is do not boast your ego necessarily by booking thousands of appointments or closing hundreds of calls for yourself if you don't have to. Because at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what are you optimizing for? Do you want to be an entrepreneur, a business owner, or do you want to be an actual setter or salesman, right? What I say here is elevate and delegate. Once we did hundreds of appointments for our clients for our fulfillment, and we established our key KPIs, our performance benchmarks, we basically delegated that. We started hiring appointment setters, we brought them in. They're doing that for us now. Now we can focus on working on the business, less so in the business. We still manage them, it goes without saying, but we have leverage. So I don't need to close 20,000 of appointments, 50,000 sales calls in order to master the skill set to the point beyond. Honestly, there's just diminishing returns. If any guru comes and says, I've done thousands of appointment setters or tens of thousands of closes in order to have the authority to teach you here, honestly, fair enough, props to them. But like I said at the beginning of this call, there's a point of diminishing returns, and you can pretty much get 80% of the way there with 20% of whatever these guys are trying to sell you. And so again, don't overcomplicate it. Don't be a perfectionist at this thing, because no one cares how hard you worked about it. Money don't care how hard you worked to get it. Sales is way, way simpler and easier once you start understanding these core tenets and core frameworks. And by the time you realize that all of this fear and skepticism was completely unjustified, you'll laugh. You'll laugh at yourself. And so master this thing enough so that you can elevate it and then delegate it. Sure, if you're ADHD and easily bored like me, and if you learn fast and if you're intelligent, you're not going to want to do that longer than you need to anyway. You're going to get bored and you're going to want to get to the next step, which is hire your setters, hire your closers. And then you have a new skill set to learn, which is building the process and managing these guys. A closer is not going to be able to close anywhere near same percentage of leads as you would. And so bear that in mind, because that is actually the caveat, the counter to all this thing that I just said now, which is the last thing you want to let go of is your sales. Your sales is the lifeblood of your business. And so because no one will close as much as you will, and because no one will understand the market as intimately as you will do, you don't want to be working this piece through people just yet. Not until you have a robust system in place to manage your closers, not until you have the right intimate understanding of your market. Ultimately, this is that dynamic process Nick Cosmin is talking about. Well, it's as simple as basically saying, speak to clients, understand what they want, and give it to them. And so you'll need to have these points of touch with your market by virtue of closing, by virtue of selling and speaking to your prospects. Even when you close, even when you have a closer, you're still going to want to do some closes by yourself. And if God forbid you lose a closer, and that happens all the time, you'll still be able to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and get closing again. And it's fun, to be fair. So that's the two sides of that coin. At the end of the day, if you're doing everything by yourself, you're not an entrepreneur. You're just a glorified seller who calls themselves CEO in their email signature. And so, again, this is not about ego. This is about building a business that you own, that works for you, not the other way around, you for it. The last point that I want to leave you with is at the end of the day, when all is said and done, what I still recommend is to get a partner. When it comes to sales, when it comes to building a business, get a partner. It's more fun. You retain more profit together. You can scale faster and make a bigger pie, which again, both get to share. It's up to you though. We know solo founders, we know partner founders as well. It's just a preference. And when it comes to building a brand, when it comes to selling and building an agency at the same time, essentially it enables you to run two models at the same time. One is the done for you, the agency model, and then the other one is the coach/creator model. And they're self-reinforcing. One gives you the authority to teach and preach into the other, and the other one gives you the network from which you can attract a pool of talent and resources to pour into the fulfillment of the agency. It's really a life hack. Not enough people, I don't think anyone is speaking about it this way. Everyone seems to be making a very binary decision between the two. But anyway, I digress. This is not about sales. This is about how sales can fit strategically in your business, especially if you're not necessarily so self-inclined into selling. And so this is it. This is my 2 cents on selling and on how you can basically get the 20% that will get you 80% of the way there, and how you can basically kick all of your excuses to the side right now and basically start closing. Hope this is helpful, and until next time.